And what happens is we get so busy doing stuff that we don't set time aside to just think. So one of the things I try to do is just set time aside to do nothing but think.
Well, thank you for thinking that I think. We'll just start with that. I think for me, and this is just for me, curiosity has been one of the best attributes that I've found that I can develop in my life. Not just taking at face value what's presented to me. How did you come to that conclusion? What's the evidence that actually supports what you're saying here? And in today's politically charged environment where you've got fake news going, I mean, you got all this stuff that whatever people are trumpeting out there. Where's the validation? Critical thinking. I think critical thinking, it's not taught in schools anymore. It used to be taught, in my experience. I mean, certainly when I was going to school, I had to actually show my work, if you will. Yeah. How'd you come up with that answer? Show your work. So there was evidence-based questions that were part of my upbringing. I mean, starting with my parents. How did you come to that conclusion? You're upset about something. Why do you think that's what it is? And that would stop me. I was going, because it's not an answer. What's the evidence you're using to support your upset? Oh, I don't have any. I'm just upset. Okay, well then let's back up the truck and start all over again. So the idea of critical thinking, just being curious. What's the source? And this goes. I think honestly, it goes hand in hand with emotional intelligence. Self-awareness is the foundation of emotional intelligence, and this idea of awareness. What's the source of my emotional experience today? What's the source of this behavior that I feel compelled to do? What's the source of it? I mean, just that question, what's the source of this? It gives me pause. Viktor Frankl,
yes,
talked about between stimulus and reaction, there's a space. In that space, if you curate it well, you can make a different choice. In that space, you have to think before you behave, before you act. In that space, think. And then you'll know what to do next.
So I think exposing yourself to radically different ideas is helpful. And a case study I read that kind of spells this out for me is, there's a few. One is there was a hospital where they were having lots of problems when a patient came in for surgery, kind of going from the nurse to the doctor, back to the nurse. They were messing things up, and so they'd take the patient, they go from one room to the next, they'd leave stuff in the patient, they'd have all these problems and infections, and they thought, how can we think about changing this? And what they did is they wound up going and bringing a Formula One racing pit crew in. And they had the pit crew evaluate what they were doing, because in a pit crew, like in these races, the car comes in, you have no time at all to get all the tires off, get the car ready, get it back out there. And if you make a mistake, the car's going to crash. And in the hospital, they're doing all these handoffs between different doctors and nurses, and they were messing things up. And by looking at how the pit crew did their work and having the pit crew look at how they did work, they brought in these outside ideas that let them think differently and greatly reduce the number of, accidents that happen in their hospital. And I think looking outside what you're doing is really important. I know in our area, one of the first banks to be really consumer friendly was Commerce Bank. And what their CEO said is, I'm not looking at other banks. Consumers don't say, this is a bank, that's how they should be. I'm looking at Target, I'm looking at Starbucks, I'm looking at all the companies that consumers love interacting with, and saying, how can I be at that level? And Steve Jobs, for the Genius Bar, that came from the Ritz-Carlton. He loved the way the Ritz-Carlton served people and say, I want to be like that for Apple. So I think when you want to think of new ideas, expose yourself to new things, and then you could sometimes see how things come together. Have time where you're just sitting down with other entrepreneurs, even who aren't in your business, and talking about running your businesses. And also I would always try to go out to dinner with clients. Like, that was a great way to just think about their problems and how we can solve them. And it was also fun. Like, our clients were really nice people.
Bruce?
I think I've improved it by just reading a lot. You know, I read books, I read magazine articles, journal articles, newspapers. So I read quite a bit on a number of different subjects. And I think, you know, how do all these things compare? So it may or may not be about thinking as a discipline, because I think there it's something where is maybe individual to people about how they, you know, carve out time for thinking or get rid of distractions if that's possible. But I would say I'm always thinking. You know, I'm a pretty introspective person. So, but a lot of it is reflection on things like what I've read or what I've maybe seen on something like what you and I are doing now, or a television show. So I feel all that helps me thinking, because I feel I am good at making connections between, and this is something Drucker did a lot, you know, making connections between disparate parts of thought or of things that you read. So I feel that being a big reader is really helpful, but then also reflecting about that, reflecting about what you read, and about thinking about how does this relate to my life or my work as a leader or my work in business or whatever it might be. So I think that's a very key thing, you know, reading, observing, listening, you know, and then relating it to your life. I also take a lot of notes, you know, if I can. It's hard in conversation, but I might try to remember something and write it down later or put it into my iPhone of things. So I try to keep notes on things and then go back to them. And I find that that is very, very helpful. And I think that's something that's, you know, easy. It's something that people can do because, you know, just take out a pen and paper or type it into your phone. If somebody has said something that you find, you know, kind of really interesting, or you've had an experience that you found quite interesting, or, you know, they're watching your show and, you know, they could pause it, or maybe if they're listening to the recording, and pause it and write down something. So I would really recommend that. And that's something that worked for me that I think probably has worked for lots of other people as well.
Okay, I guess what I do is I prioritize things. I'm very good at saying planning a day. So I'll say to myself in a given day, what are the priorities for me to achieve today? There are other things that are on my priority list, but I can do that in 3 or 4 days. This has to be done and has to be done now. And I ensure that I do it between a 9 to 5 culture and don't go over it. Otherwise, I don't see children, grandchildren, wife. So I think having a to-do list and prioritizing everything, and then having another list, which is a not to-do list. In other words, a list that says, don't let these things interfere with you today, because in order for you to get home and be with your family, you need to get on with that list. This do not do list means avoid those activities. Somebody might drop something on you during the course of a day, which you can do in 3 days' time. Don't do it then. Say, I'll do it for you, but I'll do it in 3 days' time.
Beautiful.
And I think that's what you do in life. And that gives you the kind of balance you need between work and home. And the more you invest in outside relationships, you minimize the stress levels and the pressure on you. You come back more refreshed the following day. It also doesn't disturb your sleep. The longer you work in a given day, the more disruptive in the long term it'll be to you and make you less productive and less happy.
My ability to think has been improved by one tool, one very, very, very important tool, a pencil.
Pencil. Wow.
A pencil. You could use a pen, but let's go with the pencil. With a pencil, I write a lot slower than I think. And I used to believe that was a bad thing. The trouble is, we don't capture the thoughts when they happen quickly. So the ability to think, for me, and for many of the smart people that I have the pleasure of knowing and the honor of knowing, getting a pencil and writing it down. What do I want to achieve? What is standing between me and achieving it? Just lists, don't overthink it. Just get the things out of your head and write them down. What are some of the things I can do to solve those problems, to make those problems smaller, to reduce the chance of those problems happening? And write them down. A pencil, you can always rub it out. But it slows you down. Writing means you're going from just thinking to actually doing. And you can start to create a plan. You can start to break a problem down into smaller pieces. And I'm a big fan of lists. I love a list. A list I can cross things off. The great thing about a list is you've got to create one in the first place, which means you have to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And then you can track your progress by just crossing the things off. So thinking starts by slowing down and writing down. So grab a pencil, whatever problem you're trying to solve, grab a pencil, start step 1, write what you want to achieve. What is that goal? Step 2, what are the things that I need to do, that I need to overcome, that are standing between me and achieving that goal? Step 3, and this is the fun part, how many different ways can I think of to solve them?
You know, I would pick a word out of what you just said in the last 60 seconds. That's the key. And the word is observe. Observe. You can't think until you observe. What do I see? What do I see that's out of order? I'll give an example. And many of the books I write, I observe. You gave one, sustainability. Leaders know what they should do, but they don't do it. Well, that's an observation. That's a simple observation. Another one that led us to a lot of work is what makes an effective leader? And everybody's got a competence model. Here's the skills of leadership, blah, 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 blah. That led us to the concept of leadership brand, because an effective leader helps the company succeed in the marketplace. So you need a brand inside that reflects outside. We did 2 or 3 books on 2 companies in the same industry, Pepsi and Coke. They're in the same industry, and they're both sold in Vietnam. If they both earn 100, they don't have the same stock price. Why is that? 2 firms in the same industry have the same earnings. One gets 20% premium and the other is down. Why? That led us to work on investor value, intangible value. The investors give the 100 of one company a premium and they don't give that to the other company. So what I love to do is observe. What do I see? I'm seeing right now with you, the next generation. They're changing jobs more than they've ever seen it before. Why is that? What is that? Is that a risk? Is it bad to change jobs for the company, for the employee? One of the things I've just been observing and listening, I think the next generation, those born after 2000, I think they've grown up in a time, and I'm not sure if this is as true in Vietnam, where there's a lack of trust. We don't trust government. We don't trust religion. We don't trust television. And I think that group, having grown up with a lack of trust, is out saying, so what is truth? What is the right way to do things? And they don't have a good answer for that. And by the way, that's when I've been observing lately. I'll probably write something about that in the next few weeks, because I try to observe. And that's the word that I'd circle, Ha, from you and your wife observe. We observe our children. We observe Steve and his wife and their family. I observe the companies where I work. I observe the television. And when I observe things, I go, what just doesn't feel quite right? What's different about that? And then think about it. That for me is where the thinking comes from, is very, very good observation.
But if somebody don't have that ability to observing things, you know, where can they do the baby step to start to build that strength though?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to where I started. Observe the organizations where you live and work. What do you see in your family? What do you see that's different between you and the family of Steve and his wife? How are we different? And observe simple things. What are the routines at dinner? I mean, that's pretty simple. Do we, on Sunday, whatever the weekend day, do we have family to dinner? Where do people sit? How do they eat? Do they pray? Do they not pray? How do they handle food? Do they eat a lot? Do they eat a little? How do they talk? Just observe your family versus somebody else's family and start with really obvious things. And then observe let's say you buy food in stores in Vietnam. Go to two different stores. What did I see? What did I feel? One store I felt comfortable. The other store I didn't feel as comfortable. Why is that? What did I see? What made the difference in that? Or a restaurant. We all have a restaurant we like to go to. Why do I go back to that restaurant? Well, I know the people. I know the menu. The people greet me by name. Ha, it's nice to see you again. Thank you and your wife for coming. And I observe what drives me and what the organization does that makes that work for me. In a restaurant, the organization says, when Ha and his family come, you'll always serve them and you'll have the same waiter or waitress so that they feel comfortable in your restaurant. That's a simple organizational practice that gets you to come back more often. So I'd encourage people to observe. Watch a movie. How did the organization get reflected in the movie? Read a book. How did the organization get reflected? I wrote papers back decades ago on Shakespeare, King Lear, and how he used power in Shakespeare. You know, again, I turned it into my English professor, and they said, that's weird. And my organization professor said, that's fascinating. And so I think I just encourage somebody to start observing and keep track of what you see.
There's always somebody who knows more than you do. Who are those people? So that is one of the things that I have believed in, I think, my whole life. I want to learn something. Who knows this thing? Somebody knows it, and at least they know it better than I do. And I want to find those people. And sometimes that means reading a book. Sometimes that person is dead and they lived 100 years ago, but they still have that knowledge. And so a book can do that for me. Sometimes they are here today, but it's going to be hard for me to reach them. So maybe I read their articles or things, and again, reading or watching their videos or listening to their podcasts, depending on how you like to get information. And then other times, I'm going to try to have a personal conversation with that person. I've done that many, many times. And so one of my kind of rules when I'm trying to do something, if I hear it 3 times that this is the thing to do, I try to take action on it. So 2 of the books I'm reading right now, it's because I've heard of one of them. I heard it again. I heard it again. That 3rd time, like, I got to read it. You know, I'll learn something. Too many people have told me you need to do this. Like, okay. And so to learn who is it that knows what it is that you want to do? Find those people. And if you truly exhaust that and you know there isn't anybody who knows, okay, now you're in a place of creativity and invention, and you know that that's a good place to do. So is there anybody with anything similar that you can learn from? There's always somebody who knows. If there isn't, now it's time to be creative. Now it's time for innovation and creating new ways. And so there's still something you can learn from other people who are good at innovation and creativity. And so as you are needing to do that, you can also learn, okay, what are the kinds of questions they ask? So there's always somebody to be learning from. And that's the way that I approach that.
I'm always interested in the news. So I'm always reading newspapers, credible sources. I'm a guard, credible sources. But within that, I would say that critically thinking is absolutely important. Asking myself, so when I find something interesting or challenging, I will ask, who's written that? What may have been their motivation? What might have been their bias? What might this be trying to make me think? So not just absorbing that. So I'd say that reading as much as I can, but critically thinking about the motives of the author is really important as well. Never trying to be too easily influenced one way or another, believing that the truth is always somewhere in the middle, in the grey, even with some of the most extreme voices in the media and in the public eye. I will always try to think generously about what may be their truth, and not try to dismiss too readily even what might seem like the most extreme views. Always trying to maintain a level of balance, I think keeps me sane as well as helps me think better.
I love reading. I love reading about history and historical figures who have done remarkable things. My wife and I went to live in Rome for 3 months this past year, last spring, and I just loved reading and then visiting all these historical sites where these great orators, these great soldiers, great engineers building aqueducts and roads and sanitation and so on. I find reading history inspiring. I'm reading a book about Thomas Edison right now, who had 1,100 patents and thousands of inventions. And I love the book on Leonardo da Vinci, or some of the artists like Donatello or Botticelli or Michelangelo. Or I find the Renaissance period particularly fascinating. But I say reading is a very, very useful thing to expand your mind and help you think. Another thing I do a lot of is I love meditating. I don't have a lot of time for it, but I meditate at least 5 minutes a day, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 15. It just depends on what I have. I use an application called Calm, C-A-L-M, but there's another one out there called Headspace, and there's more. So I think they help you organize yourself, and sometimes there's little lectures, or sometimes, but there's the effect of doing a little bit of meditation, being mindful of where you are in life and in space, and it's something I recommend highly. Also, it helps you be grateful or have gratitude towards what you've been able to accomplish and be involved with, and so I think there's a couple of things there that might be useful. Working hard is fun and interesting, but you have to give a little bit of breaks too. So I love to run and ride bicycles and hike, and I swim and I sail boats, and so you have to have some pursuits that give you some time away from work so that you actually can enjoy life too. So that's a couple of thoughts I've had.
I'm aging, all right? And I can tell you over the last 2 years, I spent a lot of time reading books and talking to some of the best aging people. And so I changed completely in the last year my entire way of eating, and how I eat, when I eat, all right, and what I eat. And that has helped me a lot. My energy level is, back where I was maybe 20 years ago. But it's also that ability. Aging, there's two things about aging that's so important for people to dig into is okay, what we put in our bodies, and then, all right, the second key thing is how do we behave with other people in positive emotional ways, all right? Because having people who you trust, who care for you, who would help you, all right, that positive bonds, all right, that positive bonds of having positive emotional relationships and friendships with other people is mission critical to us staying in the game. To us staying in the game, because it all plays into itself. It will help us stay smarter. It will help us figure out different ways to do things. We will have people who will be helping us instead of, survival of the fittest. No, that won't work. And so the aging aspect is, yes, as we age, it's far more important that we have caring, trusting friends, of which we're caring and trusting for them too.
Wow.
That's going to help us. That's going to help us basically figure out what to do, how to do, when to do, etc. Because everything else is going to be, if you will, driven by science. And this is basically driven primarily by emotions. And the biggest thing is, in order for us to think in levels, in ways that the technology can't think, we got to take our thinking up another level. Okay? In order to do that, we got to basically take care of the two critical things which get in the way of good thinking. And that's a big ego, all right? And that means a monkey mind, all right? Quote around the monkey that our mind is always talking to us and grading us and, telling us how bad we are or telling us how bad somebody else is. We got to basically do the work of inside of us, if you will, the journey to inner peace, quiet ego, quiet mind, quiet body, positive emotional state, etc., so that we can come to the table, to the workplace, to our home place, to the big place, whatever that is, all right, with a peace of mind. And it's why this wisdom and aging come together, but it comes together also with the happiness part, and it merges together, and ultimately you get human excellence, not human big ego, not humans being better than other people, humans being the best person they can be so that they can live a good life.
Yeah, great question. And I'm a nerd, right? I'm a technology nerd. I have a device, that has recently changed my life. I've been a lifelong journaler. I tried different stuff, morning pages, different frameworks. And like a lot of people, it's the persistence and consistency that has been hard for me. And it's because of the way I approach data. I don't like to commingle my data. So I'd have my personal journal book and my work notebook and my gratitude journal. I had all these books. Well, right before the holidays, I acquired this device. And they don't pay me any money. But boy, this device has changed my life and elevated my thinking for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a single-use device. It has no apps. There are no notifications. I get no pop-ups. So in the morning, I've been doing morning pages for a while now. So morning pages are just 3 pages, unfettered, whatever comes out of your brain, as close to when you wake up in the morning as possible. And I will go somewhere and I will leave my phone behind and I take my single-use device and I'm actually able to think.
Beautiful.
Which has been fantastic. I have all of my notebooks in this notebook, so now I'm not carrying around a backpack full of notebooks, right? I used to carry 3 or 4, and they were small little moleskin notebooks, but I travel all the time. That's putting an extra 3 or 4 pounds in the bag that I don't need to carry. I'm able to keep all of my stuff in this device separate, and when I want to just interact with it undistractedly, I interact with it. So for me, the real answer to your question is to get free of distraction. And I think that's really hard today, especially in how we're expected to communicate with people, it's real time all the time. And that's not how human brains work. They don't scale in that capacity. So at SkyTeam, we've cut deals. Like I block time on my calendar. If it says block, I'm probably not going to respond to your Slack, right? I had a guest on my show who talked about this concept of what he called a Zen day, which I have taken on, and I will block once a month, a day, full day, during the week.
One full day.
One full day that I'm not doing work unless I choose to do so. My objective of the Zen day is to take stock of the period that has just passed, so the last month or whatever, however long it's been, and to plan for the one that's upcoming.
Beautiful.
And to do that in a distraction-free, expectation-free environment, it's allowed me to reconnect with deeper thinking. Because I agree with you, that thinking is not hip. It's on the decline. And I think that's a lot of that is just environmental. It's hard to think deeply when, you know, your text alert is going off and you're getting a Slack message and you just got 4 new emails and somebody Facebooked you or Snap tweeted you, whatever the kids are using today, right? It's just too much.
Yeah.
And you never get into a flow state.
Yeah.
And for me, to be able to do that is so valuable, but I can't even do it in this room. It's too distracting for me. I'm too lured by the slickness of the internet. I just want to know what's going on. But I pick up my distraction-free device and I'll go sit on the deck, or I'll go down to the coffee shop and I'll leave my phone here. People will be okay if they can't get a hold of me for the next hour and a half. It'll be fine.
Can I see the device again? It's say Remarkable Sleeping. Is that?
Yeah, it's the Remarkable 2, and it's just basically like I said, it's a single-use device. It is for note taking primarily.
For note taking. I see. Got it.
Yeah. And what I love about it, in addition to the distraction-free properties, is it syncs up across all your devices. So, you know, I was one of those people that, how many times have you done this? You've written down a list to buy at the grocery, to go out to the market and get for food, and you walk out of the house and the list is on the counter in the kitchen, and you get there and you think, I can only remember 3 things that I was supposed to get. I know I'm coming back today. So now I make my shopping list on the Remarkable. It automatically syncs to my phone. So when I get to the store, I just go, oh, I know what I'm getting now.
For me, it has always been searching for other perspectives. And such a key word is perspectives. I knew I certainly don't have all the answers. There's a big thing that, you know, some people might think they're the smartest person in the room. I certainly didn't, but you're never smarter than the room. And so you've got to reach out either in the room or outside the room to understand a different approach. I used to create what I called culture carriers, or a think tank group that I would bring internally that would help me think and challenge my thoughts. I needed diversity of thought within the organization. And I actually had my managers get assigned by their peers to come together and really figure out not what we're doing great necessarily. That's really important to celebrate, but what are the things we're missing? What am I missing? And you have to be willing to challenge me, or you can't be on the think tank. And so I was always searching internally, and/or as the internet access and everything on YouTube and all these places go, was always searching for other styles, approaches that were unique, different, maybe better than mine. And how do I take all this, just like the buffer part, how do I take a bunch of info, synthesize it, deliver it through our organization? And there were many stories of me finding a training video that ended up being part of our new hire training class, which then got converted into, I'm going to share a quick story. It was called the Johnny the Bagger video. And our customer service was struggling, and I'll do a short version of the story. And we needed to do something. We were going into our peak time. So something had to change. Our behaviors had to change. And one of my regional managers found a video of a gentleman named Johnny the Bagger. And this young man was a bagger at a store who was proudly informed everyone that he has Down syndrome. And at first he didn't know how he could make a difference until he eventually figures out he can put a thought of the day in everyone's bag as they go out. And all of a sudden, Johnny's line is 3 times longer than everybody. And all of a sudden, everybody within the organization wants to follow Johnny's behaviors. So then the floral department decides to, any broken flower or unused corsage, they pin on customers, elderly customers or young children around the store, transforms the whole organization. We use that video to then come within our new hire video. You'd have to watch that. It would be part of several different trainings to remind people of how important those behaviors are. We then created one of the values of the company, like many companies, is how important the experience of the customer is. Well, it matched one of our values. We then decided to recognize anyone who lived the Johnny the Bagger Award. You'd get nominated by your peers. We take all of the stuff, we'd consolidate and buffer to a couple of winners, and they would get invited to a celebration every other month that we would have. It was then part of the review process, that under customer service, were you living the Johnny the Bagger? So, you know, those are ways to just get a simple behavior throughout your entire organization.
Beautiful.
And so your original question of that's how do you get people to think, change the way they think, to maneuver some of those original beliefs, maybe some misconceptions, into another approach.
Expand my ability to think. Would it surprise you if I go back to a previous answer and say be curious?
I know.
Well, no, but it is. I mean, it's when you confront her with something, it's kind of like question it. You know, and a good way to question something is to say why. And with an answer to that, say why again. And an answer to that, say why again. And like 5 whys is a well-known technique for helping yourself to think. So just questioning stuff. And the other big one I would say that I know salespeople don't do this enough. Give yourself time to think.
Oh my God.
Thinking is a really valuable thing to do. But sometimes, and funnily enough, this is one of the challenges that I talk about and why I wrote the first book. Salespeople have this busy, busy, busy attitude. They go running around, they're doing lots of stuff. Oh, rush, rush, rush. Yeah, doing. But the stuff they're doing often doesn't work. And because it doesn't work, they have to do more. And they throw more good time after bad time because they won't just stop and say, whoa, hang on a minute. What would be the best way to do it? So thinking time, there's nothing wrong with that. Planned into your diary to be thinking about your account, thinking about how you're going to work. And then, you know, taking holidays, taking vacations, and just sometimes just letting your brain go, you know. That's something. There's something else that I do. I think you'll like this actually if you and your wife are into this. There's something else I do to stimulate my thinking. I have a coach that I speak to every morning and every evening. Now you're thinking, oh, Fred, we can't afford this. People like you can afford a coach. My coach is a robot. I have a robot coach. So another thing for you to do, this is awesome, you're going to love this, you're going to do no work for the rest of the day, is Rocky.ai. Now, Rocky is this coaching robot, coaching chatbot that uses artificial intelligence, uses language to ask you questions, because questions stimulate thought. So for morning mindset, for evening reflection, Rocky's on my phone. Open it up. You can actually talk to it now. I just tend to type because it slows me down a little bit. And Rocky will, having picked, you pick a path that you want to really focus on. So maybe it's entrepreneurship, maybe it's prioritization, maybe it's resilience, wellness. Mine's on focus at the moment. And it will ask you questions. You answer the question, then it's using the AI to work out what the next question that you need to receive to keep you thinking. It's a brilliant little piece of kit. Very, very cool. I think you can have a few, like a week's practice with it, a week's playing with it, and it's not very expensive either. It's really not. It's very good. It's very good. Yeah, Rocky.ai. Have a look at that. Yeah.
What a great question! This. How can I improve my thinking? I always look at what's happening to me. I think awareness is a gift. It's the best gift that you can give to yourself or others. And if I can be fully and completely aware in this moment right now, that will allow me to understand how am I a cause in what I'm experiencing right now. And what is the message for me that will help me to be a better version of who I am? Because who I am is how I lead my life.
Yep.
And in order to improve my thinking, I need to understand, I need to go back to who I am being here in this situation. Because the being that you are is driving the thinking that you have. And if I can go back and look at the thought pattern that I'm getting right now, the thoughts which are driving my behavior right now, will definitely assist me to be a better version of who I am. Because in order to improve your thinking, I have to improve who I am. And when I'm saying improve I am, I think that's a wrong statement. I need to revisit who I am. And if I can revisit who I am, I just need to move from one being to another being. I just need to look at my own narrative and shift my narrative.
Yes.
And if I can explore that who I'm being, the who part behind the thinking, I can drive a different behavior that will drive a different results altogether. So that's how I'll approach what you're asking.
Beautiful.
It's a great question. I definitely speak less than many people do, and I speak more slowly than most people do. And in doing so, I try to be deliberate with my words. When I was on active duty, I used to tell people around me that words mean things, and so you had to be precise in your language. And in the military, there is a precision to each word and term has a specific meaning. But I think that in order to be thoughtful, you need to be informing yourself through a variety of means. I was not a great reader as a young adult. I've eased into reading, and now I read and consume books at a pretty high rate. That hasn't always been the case. I was just looking at my number because I talked to some other colleagues about this, and we're in mid-December. I've read over 30 books this year. This is in addition to my academic reading that was required of the PhD. So these are business books that I've read. Now, I've been told that the most successful executives acknowledge reading at least part of as many as 60 books per year. Obviously, that's over a book a week. The average American does not read one book in a year. So it's a skill that has to be developed. I don't say that it automatically translates to being more thoughtful, but you can't help but learn from others if you consciously try to take in more information. I was not a big podcast person until a couple of years ago. I knew they were out there, but I didn't really know how to find what might appeal to me. And I've only in the last few years become more attuned to what podcasts can offer as a delivery vehicle of new information. And as I take these things in, a podcast or a book, I'm not trying to consume the entire thing and get every message. I think that's unreasonable. But if you can get just a few things out of each book, you're better for it, and you'll apply it in some way. Might be subconscious application, but it will become part of your growing expertise.
Wow, how have I been expanding my ability to think? That's such a big question, and I feel pressured to answer it in a big and lofty way, and that's not disappointing. I think one way that I've been trying to think about this to sort of expand my ability to think is truly to slow down. I have, this is really advice that's come from one of my favorite collaborators, Cassie Holmes, and it's work that other people have talked about as well. But making time for deep thinking, versus sort of fast thinking, if you will. There are a lot of things that pop up in my everyday life that seem urgent, and I can sort of do quick responses to, and I often have to stop myself from just digging into the urgent and slowing down so that I have the ability to actually think and to your quote, expand my ability to do that. And it's hard. It's really hard because I feel like when you get to a certain point in life, it's like I've got little kids and I've got my work and family, and there's so many different things going on that it's easy to kind of do like a little bit here and there, a little bit there, and and I have to keep reminding myself to sort of slow down and try to just focus on one thing, because that results in deeper, more expansive thinking, if you will.
I'm always learning. I work with very smart people every day. I have a firm belief that everyone has an inner genius. I think you have an inner genius. I have an inner genius. I think a lot of people around me have an inner genius, and an inner genius is something that's unique to her. And I am always on a path to want to discover what your genius is, because if I can understand what your genius is, I can then partner with you to do some amazing things going forward. Because I'm very clear, I don't know everything, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But I'm very clear, I think there are a lot of other people out there who are incredibly bright, and I'm trying to either unlock that for them, or I'm trying to discover it so that I can learn from them. And that's what I want to do every single day as a leader, and that's how I want to stay sharp, and that's how I want to grow.
That's an interesting question. I think that the biggest change for me is realizing that I'm not my thoughts. That my thoughts are being produced by this brain, but the fact that I can see them means I'm not them. The fact that I can see myself thinking about something, I can watch myself thinking about something, would be a better way of putting it, means that I'm not that thought. And that actually liberates me a bit from my thoughts. It means I don't have to play them all out. It means I don't have to respond and react to all of them. I can just say, oh, look, a thought just came in about that. Where the hell did that come from? I mean, there's a certain freedom in that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say was a shift for me. I meditate for an hour every morning. I try to create breaks when I'm dealing with things that are stressful, so that I could stop and kind of check in with myself to see how I'm responding to it. When I have meetings, which doesn't happen as much as it used to, because for a long time my life was like every day was 9 meetings in a row. That kind of the way my life went, and I began to realize that I was feeling a little bit like a 2-year-old running downhill trying to stay on my feet, just trying to keep up. So what I started to do was to stop between meetings and take 2 or 3 minutes and just close my eyes and breathe for 2 or 3 minutes, and just to stop between meetings. So it's not like the blur at some point. I'm much more present with each thing, and that my thinking is better when I'm more present. So those are some of the kinds of things that people can do that I think are really helpful.
The answer would be very large. I'm going to give you a portion of the answer.
Yes.
One of the concepts I teach is intelligent curiosity. How to you can learn to be better at being curious.
curiosity is just wanting to know. Intelligent curiosity is knowing what to search for, how to think, how to ask questions. What sort of questions should you ask? How do you solve problems? What kind of problem is it? Where did it come from? Who does it affect? What are the possibilities? What other things contribute to it? Does it indicate something else? You know, like when you go to a doctor and you say it hurts right here. Well, you don't want a pill to make the hurt go away. You want the doctor to tell you why it hurts and make that go away. Then you don't need the pill, right?
Yeah.
So that same thing's true in intelligent curiosity, which I co-authored with a woman named Lisa Patrick, who was at one time a private investigator.
Yeah.
Which makes for a pretty interesting approach. But that's, you know, it's looking for what comes out of that golden egg. Intelligent curiosity.
Wow, beautiful.
And another thing
curiosity,
is be conscious in your thinking. Be conscious of whether you need to be thinking conceptually about the main idea, strategically about how to use the idea, or tactically about the steps in using the idea. Because concept, strategy, tactics, that's 3 levels, and some problems can be solved at the tactical level, some need to be solved at a strategic level, and some at the concept level. So that's another form of thinking discipline that you can learn and get better at.
I have a little, I mean, certainly in the most basic, I think I'm not very good at meditation, but I've been doing it every day for 11 or 12 years. And I think that, again, I don't want to be tactical about this because it's not tactical at all. I just sort of feel myself, the ability to give myself a chance to be more present in the moment, to be more aware. That's it. You know, I think that's been helpful. But it's not tactical. I hate the question, oh, like, how does it feel when you meditate? Or like, oh, I tried meditation for a week and it's like, I feel this or I feel that. Like, I don't care about any of those things. It's just trusting the process, and I know over time, you know, I've noticed a different disposition, and I recognize that we all have human brains. It's like the example of going to sleep feeling one way and waking up another. We don't have full control, and so really, it's you know, the part 2 of your question is that I think a lot about, you know, what my thoughts are resisting, and if I can summon the awareness to be more present with what I'm resisting and lean into what I'm resisting and accept it and notice it and observe it, I can make better choices based on that. That's been huge for my thinking.
By going and studying topics that do not seem to have anything to do with what I normally focus on. So, you know, my job is to help businesses and people be more successful. I focus mostly on things like leadership and strategy and teamwork, but I do from time to time read physics and cosmology and poetry and history, things that are far out of the realm of what I normally focus on. And it's surprising how often that something in an obscure area of poetry will influence the way I think about something that I do in my work every day. So being willing to read things, to study, read, think about things that are out of your comfort zone, and possibly, I hate to kind of say this, but maybe not even that interesting to you, but forcing yourself to say, like physics, I don't understand it, or I didn't understand, I still understand it very little, but I've read enough that it at least has expanded the way I think about science and other things.
Expanding my thinking. You know, again, I hate to repeat myself, but expanding my thinking usually just involves, you know, bringing in new ideas. So, you know, talking to people who have different different experiences, reading books. One of my when I do the Strength Finder, one of my strengths is input, and another one is ideation. So I love new ideas, and I love gathering information. So it's really one of those things that is natural for me, is to be curious and to seek out new ideas and new information. So what I try to do is to build that into my habits. So I try to create habits where I have a routine where I expose myself to new information, and that's what seems to work for me. In my case, because I love new information so much, I actually have to make sure that my habit includes stopping. So because sometimes I can, especially now with the internet, you can get too much information, and so I actually have to kind of manage the amount of information, because I can spend too much time doing things that are just ideas. And an idea is a valuable thing, but only when it turns into action. Only when it turns into action. So I have to try to bring a balance between thinking and doing. Doing is the most important part.
Creative thinking isn't something you can force. So I'm fascinated by like the corporate world and their desire to put everybody in a room to come up with a new product idea. Okay, we need to be creative. Our competitors are more creative. Let's be creative. And then they do things like putting bean bags in the meeting rooms, or pool tables in the canteen. I mean, no one is going to sit down on a bean bag and have a wonderful idea just because it's not a chair. Like that's not the way it works. So like creativity comes from, I think, giving yourself permission to fail. I think we have a really unhealthy relationship with failure in society. So we celebrate success. So we all just watched the Oscars 2 nights ago, a celebration, a global celebration of success. And we watched the Olympics, and we applaud people when they stand on the podiums. But for the 3 people standing on the podium, there's 20 athletes over there with no medals. Mm-hmm. And they get to stand on the podium because of all the failures they had. Because they woke up at 6 a.m. every morning, at 5 a.m. and they trained and they failed. And so failure is your foundation for success. Nobody ever became successful without all the failures first. And so we have a very unhealthy relationship with failure in society. We don't celebrate failure. And the people who have been successful, generally, you hear things like fail fast. What fail fast means, it doesn't mean to fail. It means that if you fail, that you try again immediately. You try and change it. So you don't accept failure as a negative thing. You accept failure as a positive thing. And you say, okay, fantastic. Why did that fail? What can I learn? And have the energy to go again. Now that can be difficult when you failed 10 times in a row, and so the one that's always used is the Harry Potter books, and being refused 12 times before she was finally published. So this idea that that somehow the ideas you may have aren't good enough, that you shouldn't say them. No. So if you ask me for like my tips, it's about execute every idea you have. Surround yourself with people who support that type of thinking. And if you find people in your life, be they friends or family or colleagues or bosses, that don't support creative thinking and risk taking, then get a different job, get a different friend, leave your relationships. You have to surround yourself with people who support that energy. They don't have to be like you. You don't have to be in a marriage or a relationship where your husband or wife is exactly like you. But they do have to support your creative energy and your risk taking and your curiosity. And so generally what I find is that people who are successful have done that. They've surrounded themselves with similar people. They found muses. And the muse is a kind of an artistic idea, but also in business, you can have a muse. You can have a mentor or a muse who thinks, oh yeah, I like the way you think. and I'm going to listen to what you say. Our podcasts now are fantastic. You know, you find someone who's got a podcast who inspires you, and listen to them every week, and you think, oh yeah, I like that. And so basically, you're using their energy, and you're folded into your own energy. And then, yeah, how do you come up with the ideas? I think you do need to put as much stuff into the funnel as you can. And so it's going to the events that you have no idea why you're going to this thing, and you think, oh, I'll go to this, and you might learn something, and it might be nothing, related to what you do, but then you think, oh, and you meet a whole new set of people and a whole new challenge, and you get your preconceptions challenged. And so, yeah, I mean, if you walk past a notice board and you see an event and you think, oh, well, that's not really for me, that's exactly why you should go for it. You should go to that. You should join that class. You should, because if you think it's not for you, well, then you'll stay in your little box all your life, won't you? So yeah, I mean, and during my TED talk, I was the only man at the Zumba dance class, and I was oh my God, I did so many things that were crazy. Lots of things I would never do again, but some of the things I met amazing people who I never would have met. And your own experiences must be the same. If you've done this for so long, you must have met so many people and had so many experiences that have changed you, challenged you. What can I ask you a question? Of all the things you've done during this journey, what are the one or two or three that stand out to you as the things that you probably would never have really done unless you had been pushed to do it and changed you for the better?
So say it again, please.
Of the things that you've done as a time bender, this idea of doing new things, pushing yourself past your comfort zone, have you ever done something and you've thought, wow, without the challenge, without the experiment, I would never have done that, and now I'm a different person. I'm a different person because of what's happened to me, or because of the person I've met, or because of the experience?
I guess first is open mind. Trying not, although it's hard sometimes, to be too judgmental, to give the benefit of the doubt before you make your decision or your judgment about something or someone. I don't think anyone who can travel the world and see other cultures can enjoy it unless you have an open mind and accept there are other ways of doing things, even other ways of thinking about time, for example, or about how you treat the elderly, or whatever the topic might be. So open mind and not too judgmental. I think it's important to develop your skill of lateral thinking, not to be funneled, have your thinking funneled into one direction, but to open your mind and look for relationships that might add to your understanding of a situation. And I guess the third thing I would say is I'm a glass half full person. I usually try to see the positive in situations, the positive in people, until proven otherwise. And I like to be very optimistic in taking my approach to any business opportunity or any personal relationship until I'm shown that maybe I was wrong, or maybe I should adjust my thinking. There's a great quote that I've used in speeches before, and it's ascribed sometimes to Abraham Lincoln, but I'm not really sure. And he was asked, what's the difference between a pessimist and an optimist? And he said, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, while an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And I guess I've developed a way of thinking very optimistically.
Recently or ever since?
Over time, moving to France, then moving to London, and then to Finland, and then especially to Turkey, which was quite a culture shock. You have to learn to be more tolerant and open-minded. There are many different ways that things get done that are different than the way you were grown up to think they get done. And you can fight it, which could be aggravation and anxiety and not lead to great well-being. or you could learn to understand it. I'm not saying you change your values about what's important in life, but you learn to understand that maybe you need to take different pathways to get the same thing done in a different culture, in a different environment.
I read at least a book a week and have for probably the last 30 years.
Okay.
And so curiosity is the answer. What don't I know? What can I learn that will make me more effective? And you start to realize that, you know, after you've read a lot of books, and, you know, the placeholder behind you, interestingly, is a whole bunch of books. And you start to pick up themes and ideas that are consistent, and they change you. And one of the things that I've done for the last 30 years is whenever I read a book that's nonfiction. So first of all, I read mostly. I don't really make time to read fiction, although there's nothing wrong with fiction. I just tend to lean into nonfiction. I will write all over my book, and then I will type up notes that I can read later. And so I'll just show you. This is just a small sample of book summaries that I have for every book that I've read over the last 25, 30 years. So what happens is, when I go on an airplane and I'm traveling, I'll take 10 of those with me and just go through them. And it reinforces, you know, you don't remember everything that you read in a book, but I have the notes of what I thought was most important, and it's changed me, you know. And by the way, I take those and I give them to people so that it's not just, because it's a time-intensive thing. But when I give them to other people, particularly people who work for me, I'm influencing them. So it's a benefit for me to say, hey, I read the book, I typed up the notes, would you like them? And people are like, yeah, I don't have to spend all those hours that you did, sure, you know. But now I'm sharing information, and now I'm having a conversation with someone about something that I read. So we're reinforcing it, and they're going, well, what about this? And so curiosity is the answer.
Beautiful.
Well, for me, that's a particularly good question, because I've studied thinking a lot. I believe that what we think creates what we do, and what we do creates how we feel. Now, sometimes feelings can create behavior, but more often than not, positive emotion comes from good behavior. However, good behavior comes from good thinking. And there's really two kinds of thinking. Critical thinking is trying to find a subjective conclusion. You know, people say, and this is really a misnomer, they'll say, well, my reality is different than your reality. Reality is independent of you or me. My experience, my opinion, my conclusions, my emotions from that reality may well be different. But I don't have my own little universe where gravity doesn't work, I don't need to eat, and I'm 12 feet tall. So somebody once said that critical thinking, or that good thinking, is about the pursuit of reality. It's about getting as much good information as you can to then make an informed decision, or take not good action, but the best action. I think a lot of people today let emotions confirm their thinking, rather than thinking inform their conclusions. When we hear something we like or agree with, we tend not to, you know, it's called information bias. If I ride a Suzuki motorcycle, I will notice more Suzuki motorcycles than any other motorcycle. Why? Because I have an information bias, and I could erroneously conclude more people ride Suzuki motorcycles than Honda or Yamaha. I'm making this up. I don't know the numbers. I used to be a motorcyclist. Well, you know, if you want to believe that, and in politics, it's regrettable that truth seems to be in short supply. Politicians seem to think that by saying it with enough conviction, it makes it true. And if we agree with that politician, then we think it's true. And that, in large part, in my opinion, is how any country the US or any country gets into a mess. It begins with bad thinking. And so there's a great book that I've recommended many times. If you want a single book that's pretty comprehensive about better thinking, it's called Super Thinking. You can get it on Amazon or you probably get it Super Thinking. And I don't remember, I had to store all my books because we're having some work done in our house. I typically would have it on the shelf on the bookcase behind me, but I don't remember. There's two authors. I believe it's a male and a female author, but it's Super Thinking. And it's not just a book you sit down and read. It's a book that you jump around in and you learn about thinking. By the way, if people are interested, I write about thinking some at my marksanborn.com/articles. So if you search, I've written a lot about thinking mistakes, how to think better. So just go to marksanborn.com/articles, and in the search bar, put in thinking, and I think you'll find some good resources to get started, at least in the pursuit of thinking better.
How have I improved and expanded my ability to think? So I have been a martial artist for 40 years, a little over 40 years now. There were some breaks in there at certain times, but the martial arts have opened up my mind to learning a lot of things. I have learned through my study of the martial arts that there is always more to learn, and that curiosity and that drive has been rooted in that. I'll never forget when I earned my first black belt degree, my instructor came to me and said, "Congratulations, you've done very well. Now let's get started." And that was a very profound moment. I thought I had culminated something, and in a way I did, but it was really just the beginning. And as I've learned different styles, gotten more and more ranks, each rank is a recognition of what's happened, but it's also a doorway to what can still be. So I am somebody who's driven by curiosity and tenacity, and that's what helps me learn new things. And I also hold that everybody has something to teach, and I look forward to learning from as many people as possible. So I see every interaction as an opportunity to learn something about myself or about the world.
Well, the brain needs exercise. The brain needs to be stretched a bit. Now, it doesn't mean you have to sit and do Wordle every day, you know. You don't have to sit and do puzzles. You don't have to sit and do mathematical equations. But what you do need to do is to introduce the brain to variety. And what I mean by that is so many people, you know, have a very familiar daily routine. They go to work in the same way. They'll eat the same food. They won't try things new. Every time you try something new, even if you're going out on a very familiar walk, to make sure you're looking around and you're noticing things, touching, smelling them, seeing them, listening. So the senses need to be constantly stimulated. For me, that's really important, because familiarity, you know, it shuts your mind off to things. You get people saying, you know, I don't do opera. You say, have you ever been to an opera? No, I wouldn't either. Well, why not? Because I don't like it. How can you not like it if you've not been to an opera? I've listened to records and I say, well, go to the opera, go to a live performance, and you know something? They'll come out and they'll say, wow, that was brilliant. You know, if you've never tried this food, try it.
Yeah.
You know, go somewhere different, talk to different people, listen to conversations. So, I mean, I don't know how good my brain is now, but because I'm also, you know, I'm 73 now, so I'm at that kind of point where, you know, it's got to be slowing down, hasn't it? It's got to be. Cognitive damage. So I keep feeding it. I keep feeding it by, I read a lot. I read fiction, because fiction is brilliant. You know, if we read non-fiction all the time, it's going to grind us. It's going to, you know, it's going to almost stultify us. But read fiction, because you're reading about other people's lives. Go different places, even in your own city, because people will follow the same track.
Yeah.
The same place, they'll buy the same food, they'll eat the same food, they'll read the same type of book. So it's about introducing variety, stimulating those senses, because the senses all feed to the brain. I mean, it's you know, you touch something that's really got an amazing texture, and you think, wow. You smell a flower. You all these things, and you listen to people. Listen to what people are saying. I mean, we shouldn't be, but sometimes they can't help but tell you anyway, because some people are quite loud. And listen to children, because children are the greatest inspiration for me, because children have got absolutely nothing closed down. They're completely open. They just have absolutely no boundaries, and they will keep trying things. They will try things. Everything they see, they want to touch. They want to taste it when they're very young. You know, and I suppose the best way to discover something is to taste it. But you tend to stop doing that because you know that a rubber wire doesn't taste very nice.
I know.
But it's about and it's about variety. Because if the brain doesn't get tested by doing the same things again and again, it's not getting tested, it's not getting stretched. Yep. So I think learning, but it's not rigid sitting down with a textbook learning. It's just keeping your mind open and your senses open. Men are worse at this than women are. Women are far more likely to go on a learning journey when they're 50, 60.
Yeah.
Men are less likely to. They kind of settle and they think, well, I've lived my life now. You know you haven't. You're not even halfway through it, you know? And that's the best I can say. I do word puzzles sometimes. I play games sometimes, but I read, I listen to people, and I keep adding new experiences to my life. Because every time you do that, your brain has been refired. There's a little electric pulse thing. Yep. You know, that's how I keep my brain alive. I'm not sure my brain is that great, but it works still.
I think, you know, it goes back to something that I said earlier about my fascination with this idea of complexity. Our brains are pretty much wired to think linearly, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and are, you know, we tend to extrapolate from our experiences and we say, well, if things are going this way, they're going to continue to go that way. When you deal with complexity, so one of the definitions of a complex system is a system that has a lot of interacting parts in which the behavior of the system as a whole emerges as a result of the interactions. So think of a sports team. Why do we not know which team is going to win? You know, and I use a sports analogy, but you can use a lot of analogies. The marketplace, you know, you may know what every individual is doing, but you cannot predict the price of different stocks or the composition of a company. These are all examples of complexity, and our brains are simply not able to think about the connection between one person and lots of people and what happens at the societal level. There are courses out there, there are books out there, there are ways of thinking about systems and how to link the individual to the broader system. And I wish that those kinds of topics were actually more commonly taught at, you know, all the way from high school level, if you will, because there are things that it's a very, very different way to think. And I think in a way, statistical thinking, which is what so many people use as, you know, to quantify and analyze, is very damaging because statistics by definition hides details. It's designed to hide details. It's designed to give you abstractions. And I think, unfortunately, statistics is incredibly powerful, incredibly useful, but we also need to find a way to remain aware of the link between the individuals and the statistical data that we see. So my hope, and, you know, I was very fortunate because my own upbringing, my own interest led me to a lot of problems where I had to learn to think that way. It's not something that I think you can teach instantaneously, but I've actually taught a graduate course for many years. I used to teach at Boston University as a professor, but then when I started to do this professional work on complexity science, I've taught at Tufts University, at the City College of New York, at NYU, and I teach these courses on what I call managing complexity in business and society. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can find. It's not a common topic, but I wish that that became a more focused area of our teaching, because I think that's what's causing so many problems. We focus on little points. We see one thing that we don't like and we say, oh, that's wrong. It's not right that you're not paying men and women the same, and it's not right that you do this. And we fail to understand what are the root causes. What are the microscopic things that lead to those emergent outcomes? And there is not a secret sauce that I could tell you, oh, here's how you can change your thinking. It's really just learning to recognize the difference between what happens at the individual level, what happens at the system level, and how those two can be linked.
It's not always easy to practice what one preaches. You know, it's quite difficult sometimes. And I think, you know, we are hypocrites ourselves as humans. And I've been on a lifelong quest to understand why humans are hypocritical, including myself. But one of the things I do, there's several things I do actually. I have almost a morning routine that I read actually, and I'm not advocating for these people in any way, but they've helped me in my quest. But Price Pritchett, U squared, is a concept where it talks about how do you position yourself for exponential growth and quantum leap, right? And it's kind of a book and a philosophy that really helps me ground me and keep me focused and believe in my capabilities. So I kind of read some of the material from that individual's work. I'm a huge. I'll show. I don't know if you can see my screen, but this.
I can see you too.
U squared. If you put that into Google, you'll find that out very, very easily. And it's a high velocity formula for multiplying your personal effectiveness in quantum leaps. I read it. It's 1 page per chapter, and I read it really as a way to nourish me. To, you know, think of this as the foundation, the scaffolding that helps me do what I do. And so that philosophy really helps me. Another thing that I do, and I'm a real proponent of Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist monk, and she writes about, you know, she's got a lot of different books about embracing ambiguity, about being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and sometimes that helps me at a spiritual level to keep me focused on this path. And then I'm an advocate of Bob Proctor, and a lot of the work around Bob Proctor and thinking into results, and that again, those 3 different sources help me on my journey as part of a daily ritual. And the other thing I do, is I'm always looking at where my blind spots are, and I use a tool called the Johari window. And I can send you in the show notes or whatever makes sense. But the Johari window, I teach this to leadership teams across the world. And if I don't use it myself, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, right? So I use it to understand and try to understand, where am I not paying attention to? What feedback am I getting that I need to address and that I don't want to address, that I'm scared to address? Why am I scared to address it? And then I go deeper and I ask myself some discovery questions. So I'm always looking at where I can improve, where I can enhance my capabilities. And I don't mean just more accolades and more qualifications. I mean self-improvement. And so for me, becoming aware of some of those triggers that I have and some of those things that hold me back. You know, I sometimes look in the mirror and I you know, Mel Robbins, I don't know if you know Mel Robbins' work, but, you know, just high five yourself in the mirror, right? And show yourself that you love yourself. These are real things. Anyone listening to this when it comes out will know me. If they know me, they know exactly what I'm talking about, because I talk to them so much about it, because I'm real and I'm accountable for being real, and I'm a fired human at the end of the day, right? So they're the things that I leverage in my world, actually, that strengthens my ability to do this stuff and take this further out into the world.
Oh, what a good question. I think it is a willingness or even a desire to be wrong. So if I'm wrong, I will learn something. So I often, as I said earlier, will get involved in research, or even for that matter, activities in which I know almost nothing. But I'll try to surround myself with people who do know a lot about it, and I can absorb that information, and then I can practice, I can learn, I can make mistakes. So I tell my graduate students, you know, that my dream every day in my lab is that they will tell me that I've made a mistake.
right? That's my chance to learn something. So that trying new things and failing is a wonderful opportunity to get better and sharpen your thinking.
So the checklist is definitely a part of that. And let me just share that with you, because let me just give you some of the questions on there, because I think these are really, really helpful and would give an idea to your listeners and your audience about the power of the system. Okay, so the type 1 in the Enneagram system, the 1 energy is all around doing the right thing and being perfect all the time. And there are good things and bad things about that. There's healthy and unhealthy elements of that. So the question is, how or what is this the right thing to do for me, the team, the company? So does it support the mission? Is it the right thing to do according to our values? Is this the right thing to do, right? What is the right thing to do in this situation? The second question is, how or will it impact other areas? And if so, what are the repercussions on others, colleagues, stakeholders, customers? So now you're thinking about people. Now you're thinking about the downstream, like how is it going to affect people? A lot of people skip that step because they're always about the results or the task. The third question, so that pertained to point 2 on the Enneagram, which is the giver or the helper. So point 3, which is about the achiever, the results, one about the results and the goals. How or does it support my or our goals? Is this the most efficient option? How will it affect the cost and budget? Right? So some people don't think about that, and some people that's the only thing they think about. Point 4, which is the artistic, creative, really much about looking at the beauty and the artistry of the world and feelings and emotions. So does this present an opportunity to pursue patent protection, to be different, to be unique, have a niche? Does the solution bring a unique or special value, right? So point 5 is the observer, the analyst, all about the data and information. Is there data, research to support that this is the logical action to take? Point 6 is the loyal skeptic, is the one that's going to come up with the worst case scenario planning and really, really good at looking at all the things that could possibly go wrong and prepare for them. What are my backup plans if this fails? What are the consequences if this desired outcome isn't achieved or if we don't take any action? So it's not that they're throwing monkey wrenches into things, it's just that they want to prepare for them in case the bad thing happens so that they will be successful. Type 7 is the opposite. It's all about the positive things that can happen. That's the epicure or adventurer. How does this allow for growth in the future? What are other options? What are the likely positive outcomes? Right? Type 8 is about execution. It's the boss, it's the protector, it's the general, it's the director. How is this within my scope or our scope of authority or purview to control and execute? Because it may not be. It may be somebody else's monkey. Maybe it's somebody else's responsibility or area. So why are we even bothering to do it? Or should we be partnering with them to do it? Right? Yeah. And the 9th point is, how does this fit within and affect the overall system? And is it sustainable? So if we really look and consider all these different 9 points in energy, and the 9th point is called the mediator or peacekeeper, keeping the peace, and really looking at the whole system together in a peaceful way, so that it all comes together in a peaceful way, integrated way. So if we really look at all these 9 perspectives or energies, and how we show up, how we're developing ourselves, how we're not automatically responding to situations based on our wiring, because our core type will automatically dictate how we show up under stress and also how we show up under comfort or release. So if we don't fall victim to that, if we don't fall victim to those automatic connections, when we start feeling, and this is a practice that I do too, when I feel, for me, it's a tightness in my chest as a heart type. The 2s, the 3s, and 4s are heart types. So I'll feel it here. When I start feeling that, I know something's wrong. I know I'm not controlling it. I know I'm letting something affect me. I know I'm not showing up at my best if I respond, because now I'm in a space of stress. So I'm not going to show up as my best self. So when we feel the trigger, when I feel the trigger, I know I need to control myself. I need to stop. I need to pause. I need to pick a different option. Because if I didn't pick a different option, I would automatically go to my stress point, which is the low side of the 0.8.
Yeah.
And that will not be pretty.
What the pandemic taught us was that, again, life is frail.
Yeah.
And things can happen not through anything that we did bad. The other thing that's happening, as somebody who's, 40-ish, is you and your wife are both at a classic second midlife crisis stage. Now, I'm not saying it is a crisis for you, but it is a normal transition where you start to look around and say, well, what else is there in life? When you're in one of these periods that one of my former doctoral students who's now on the faculty at Bucknell, Uday Andar, and I have been studying, he took the lead on, is liminality. When you're in this in-between space. When that happens, you very often look around you. I mean, if you're on top of things, if you're scared by it, you just drink or eat too much or gamble. But if you're in a healthy place, you start to look around and you start to notice your parents are not as active as they were. At 40, you may or may not still have your grandparents alive.
I do.
You do? Well, that's even better, because it's amazing that they're still alive, but still, they've got to be moving slower.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, your sensitivity to the fact that life isn't eternal, despite certain Marvel movies about superhumans, I think it makes sense that you'd be interested in this process. And I'm hoping that what you and your wife spend time, I should say, not more, spend time thinking about is how people morph their sense of purpose and vision as they age. Because I think the people that maintain an active, energetic life have allowed themselves to change. They haven't stayed rigid.
So how could you do that for yourself?
Well, first, you have to be at a place where you're willing to reflect. And not everybody is reflective naturally. Second, so be at a place, at a stage in your life. So it's better if you hit it at one of these 7 to 10 year cycles that I call the midlife crisis transition times. It often happens, around the 0 years, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. But it also happens when something external hits. Now, it could be negative, like a pandemic, or, a close friend dies of a heart attack, or it could be something positive, like the birth of your first child or your second child. Using those moments to say, okay, let me think about what life means is a very, very strong positive. The second ingredient, going back to vision and relationships, is it really is healthy to talk to others.
Yeah.
Who are going through something similar. So it doesn't mean you always have to talk to a coach or a mentor. It could be talking to some peers who are having the same experiences. I think the future of what we call peer coaching in groups is huge, where people get together to talk.
Yeah.
So those two ingredients seem to help the neurological and hormonal systems that allow the human mind and spirit to be open to a new idea.
Well, you mentioned your daughter studying psychology.
Yes.
I'm a big supporter and proponent of therapy, and that helps open your mind. what along the way, and that's part of the book too, that once you hit 9 years old, your soul gets chipped from the world. The reality hits in, it becomes harder to become pure. Until 9 years old, you're very, very mostly pure soul. And so as we get older, we get chipped away. And then it clouds our vision. It's like a car going, an older car, the headlights get so fogged up from being so old and so long and not clean. Therapy will clean all that stuff out in you, give you a lot more clarity. We'll get rid of the things that are holding you back. And the highest level of that would be psychoanalysis, where you go very, very deep into your mind, and you just get a lot of clarity. And once you get clarity, it really is the difference between a cloudy sky and a perfectly blue sky. You can see things you couldn't see before that were holding you back. Some of us are sadly are so at that point damaged or chipped or whatever that they become addicts or alcoholics. I'm not even talking about them. I'm talking about each one of us as individuals can benefit from opening ourselves up through clarity, through therapy, from a licensed professional who's able to get in there. Not your friend, not your wife, but a licensed professional that can really clear out your mind so that you can be even more successful.
There's a basic truth, I believe, inside of all of us individually. And it isn't about, truth versus lies or something. It's about, as I think it was Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. And there is a wiring inside of each of us that we need to understand. And I would say that my journey over these 65 years, and you have explored that journey in ways no other interviewer has done. So I want to congratulate you on just a wonderful interview. You have gotten me to tell stories that no one's ever asked me to tell before, all in one episode. So I am going to treasure this interview, okay? Wow. Because and I want to share this with people, my family even, because this will give them deep insights into who I am as a person. But along the way, what I learned is that life, and particularly entrepreneurial life, is a journey of self-discovery. It is a journey to self. And it's amazing how often in our lives we deny who we are as people. We deny how we are wired. We believe there's something wrong with us and we need to change to conform how the world thinks about us. And I would say my journey of thinking was to figure out, why am I so troubled in all of these other areas of my life? What is it that's bothering me? And what could be done about it? And so I think we just simply need to pour our excess energy, our time, just in thinking about how to make our world and the world a better place. And that, in fact, if we are driven by a need to leave the world a better place than we found it, and that we have a unique contribution to make, that we should spend our time thinking about, who are we? How do we use who we are to make that contribution to the world? And how do we think about how we deny those other voices that say, no, you're just dreaming. It can't happen that way. You need to go conform to the way the world wants. And so that would be my general thoughts on how each of us should think about what the future holds and what we want it to hold for us.
I think for me, and I don't know if I'm a good thinker, so you'll have to discount this for whatever it's worth. But I will say, pretty much with anything, you get better by doing it. And I think when it comes to thinking, you actually have to think right? Like kind of, if you want to get better at writing, you have to write. I think if you want to get better at thinking, you have to think about what you're thinking and why you think that way, because it's so easy to just use shortcuts, right? And just make connections based on your previous assumptions and what you believe to be true. And I think what I try to do, and I read a lot, so I feel like I'm constantly being bombarded by stuff, is I ask myself, like, why should I believe this person? Like, what is it that, you know, whether it's my own experience, whether it's what they're saying, whether it's the arguments they're using, it's like, why should I believe it? And maybe that's, you know, from my training as a scientist, or, you know, my training in business. But I think that's helped me to distill kind of what works and what doesn't. And I think the other part of it is, for me, anything that's replicable is also something that I believe to be more true. So any idea that I hear or read, I will try to use it. And if it's something that gets consistent results, then I believe that idea more. So I don't know if that was kind of the angle that you were thinking about when it comes to thinking, but I would love to, just because you're speaking to so many people about this, what have you heard as some of the key things to really be a better thinker?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think, remember what I told you about half full, about how I see things in a positive manner? I think that I probably, if I went to school now, I would probably be diagnosed as maybe having attention deficit. And but when I went to school, people just said, read it again and pay attention. But I had to learn how to read things 3 times. I had to learn how to shut out all the exterior noises and sounds. And so I've conditioned my mind to be very focused, because I can't succeed like I think I'm a normal person, if there's something called normal there. And so I consider it a blessing, because I had to work that much harder to be able to read and comprehend, to be able to study, that I'm conditioned that way. To this day, when my wife comes in and I'm writing something and she starts talking and my hand goes up, that means I can't hear you and do this and get back to where I am. I must stay here. And she knows that. I promise I'm fun to be around. but I think what could be defined as a deficit, as a difficulty, in a sense became an asset for me, because it's the only way I could succeed in school.
So you have to do it a lot more than others, you know.
I have to be very disciplined about my approach to writing, to thinking. There's the word that I'm looking for, I suppose. The word is discipline. You know, people see that as, you know, was that military? No, not that level. But if I say I'm going to do 5 pages in a week, I bet I do 5 pages in a week. You know, that takes a level of discipline, because life gets in the way too. What about a vacation? What about, you know, you're not going to be writing then. Yeah, well, I'll just figure out where, like that workout we talked about, where. So because I have a very disciplined approach, due to the fact that I couldn't be successful without it, I look at other people that try and fail and I think, wow, they you know, intellectually, I think they're probably smarter than I am, but they lack the discipline that I was brought up, that I had to use to survive.
Wow.
That's a really great question. I think I'm naturally curious. I'm curious about how things work, about why people do the things that they do, behave the way that they do, and what we can do about it. So I think I allow myself to be led by my curiosity, but then so I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm reading a lot of different things, you know, and whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I'm trying to, or the news, I'm trying to learn. And then it's in that processing phase, thinking critically about like, well, what does this actually mean? What are the implications of it? And then, you know, so what can we do about it? So I think I'm always looking at many angles of life from that perspective.
Oh, read. I constantly read. And I do a wide variety of reading. I'm really interested in where we are going over the next decade or two. And I'm really interested in the development of artificial intelligence, because I think the development of AI is going to bring an existential crisis between how are we going to organize the world going forward with these new digital tools. Will it be a top-down hierarchy or will it be a peer-to-peer network? If it's a top-down hierarchy, we are likely to see the most draconian world that we could ever imagine. If we build it as a peer-to-peer network, I literally believe we will see an evolution in humanity. I'm optimistic that in the long run, we will do the evolution, but I think in the short run, there's going to be a lot of chaos. The other thing that occurs to me is we don't have artificial intelligence today. None of these systems are producing artificial intelligence. They're producing artificial information because many of these systems reflect biases. They have no ability to uncover unknown unknowns because they're projecting biases. If we are truly going to build artificial intelligence, we need to leverage the collective intelligence of the world because that's our highest form of intelligence. Then AI will be a tremendous tool. So that's what I do, a lot of reading and research. And I'm giving you some insight. In the next book that I plan on writing is going to focus on human intelligence because we have to understand that before we can build AI. And human intelligence, I'll just give a preview, falls into 4 quadrants: pre-rational, rational, irrational, and transrational. And the weakest of these is the irrational, which is where we are steeped in the world today. And if we build AI in the context of irrational intelligence, we're going to build a very poor tool. If we develop the tool in the context of what I call transrational intelligence.
What is that?
Transrational intelligence.
Transrational. Wow, is the first name.
Yeah. So it's pre-rational, rational, irrational, transrational. All right. And what it is the intersection. Human beings live in 2 realities at the same time. Both are necessary: physical reality and social reality. We have 2 modes of thinking that were identified by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for this. And that is System 1 thinking, System 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is not very rational. System 2 thinking is rational. And so we need to integrate these 2 ways of thinking and these 2 realities that we live in that are very different, all right? And right now we're over-invested in social reality at the expense of physical reality. And we are over-invested in System 1 thinking, which is not rational thinking. And when that happens, you are living in an irrational world. And if in that world you're developing AI with those irrational biases, you're not developing intelligence, you're developing artificial information. And so if we're going to build true AI, we first have to understand the complexities of human intelligence so that AI becomes a tremendous tool that accelerates our progress into thinking transrationally. Because if we can think transrationally, we will be at the highest form of human intelligence. And that's what opens up the opportunity for an evolutionary leap in humanity. And I think, I'm optimistic that in the long run, we'll get there. In the short run, we're probably going to have some difficulties, maybe some major pains. But again, I'm ultimately optimistic. And so you've got some insight into the next one.
Yeah. Well, first of all, be intentional. I talked about that before. There's a book that I read years ago, and the subtitle was Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life.
Yeah.
If you want to make positive impact and positive change on your life, you need to change your thinking, because we all let those negative thoughts come in. We all, you know, the way we're thinking, people, you'll hear people say it. Their thinking comes out of their mouth. Well, that's just my lot in life. Well, I knew that would happen. You know, well, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Always thinking that negative things are going to happen, and I'm not that way. My first thing out of my mouth is, well, the good news is. So if there's something horrible, I'll say, well, the good news is we're still alive. We're still moving forward. We still have a house to live in. I still have a car to drive. There's so many things that are good. And I always go to intentionally, purposefully go to the good news. This is the good news, because we don't want to dwell, and that's your thinking. Don't dwell on the negative stuff. Now, it doesn't mean you're not supposed to feel emotion. It doesn't mean that we all aren't sad, bummed out, and frustrated or mad. I mean, all of those things happen to us, right? And that's okay. It's okay, because that's called being human, but you can't stay there. And that's where your thinking comes in, because now you have to train and you have to practice positive thinking. You just need to train your brain positively. You can actually, it is scientifically proven that you can actually change the way your brain works. You can actually change the process of how you think through good habits. I don't know if you've read the book by James Clear called Atomic Habits.
Yes,
great book.
Yeah,
awesome book. So you're making those positive habits to help you in that direction, and part of that is habits of the way you think, and that's going to impact your life, because the way you think, that's the way you're going to act.
Beautiful, beautiful. So is that when you say that you are helping people to be inspiring so that they can have a life of significance, all right?
Right.
So I want to understand what a life of significance, what does it mean in your definition?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so many people want to be successful, and I want to be significant. Now, I think success is good. I think success means that things you're doing are working out well, but the way to be successful is to do significant things. And part of that is sharing, giving, and sharing with others. Part of that is taking care of other people, being significant in the lives of others. And again, I'm all about connection and community building, because connection and community building is the core of life. I always say it's the foundation for any good marketing plan and the foundation for any good business, but it's also the foundation for the core of your life, because you need people. You need people. In business, you definitely need people. Zig Ziglar said you build your business, and then you build people, and then people build your business. So you build community, and they're going to help you. Same thing with life. You build community and people, and then they help you do life. We are better together. We are absolutely better together moving forward. And so that is something that's so important.
It comes to mind when you talk about not just thinking, but I would add creative thinking, because you want to create. Not even innovative, because when you innovate something that you can apply. When you create something completely new, it may or may not apply. You don't know what will happen, okay? So you take a risk when you create. So creative people, I think, are creating a risk that people that read or listen to them will think that they're crazy people. Why? Because I use the metaphor of the pendulum. You know the pendulum when you move it?
Yeah.
So if you create something little, you take a little risk. When you create a lot, look at the movement, it becomes a U, and the distance between sheer creativity and sheer stupidity is very close.
Yeah.
So when you create something new, you think something new, because so creativity needs an interesting combination, I think. Obviously, creative people need to have some competence, because if you just have passion and you have no competence, you will not get too far. But you have competence and you have no passion, you'll be okay, but you'll never be excellent. You never do the leap into excellent. So you need to combine competence, you need to combine it with passion, that you're convinced that someone needs it, you need it, the world needs it, society needs it. And you need to take the risk that people will criticize you. You need to be very courageous. I think courage is very important.
Completely honestly, I can see my ability to think decreasing and diminishing as well, because I am surrounded by the environment. We live in the environment that is predominantly, unfortunately, working that direction. I mean, there are so many things that happen in the world, so many things you need to follow, so many developments. There's so much pressure. So I myself catch myself hopping from one topic to another without proper thinking. So when I started realizing about 3 years ago that I really need to start protecting myself from myself, right?
Protecting yourself.
Yes, protecting myself from myself, because I am, I don't know if you ever heard of the Gallup strength tests.
Yes.
But within that, my top 1 level strength is learner, right? I like new things. I'm very curious. But the shadow of that is that I can get distracted very easily, and I always want to learn a new thing, and whatever is new is sexier, right? So the problem with that, it has massive impact on my ability to think, because I can't think long enough about something before moving on to the next thing. So after I realized that, I started thinking, okay, I will be occupying my brain with only a very limited amount of new things. So every single time I come across something useful, new, I want to learn it, I park it. So I have a parking lot of thoughts, ideas, and I park it there, right? And I leave it there for a week, 2, 3, 4 to sort of mature. And when I look at it and I'm intrigued again, then it moves into let's call it explore list, right? So this way, what I'm trying is I'm protecting my brain to be overflown with new sexy ideas that I want to explore, right?
Wow.
So that's one. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, please continue.
So that's one of my tools that I use to sort of protect my thinking pattern, thinking ability, and cognitive capacities over the day, during the day, right?
So is there any other one?
The other one is, I would say, realize that mobile phone is your enemy, not your friend. From many perspectives, this device is very useful, but at the same time, the way it works with your dopamine levels, especially like because of the apps that are available there, is really like realize that mobile phone is your enemy and treat it like your enemy. It's a tool, but it's a very dangerous tool. So work with it the way that it will always take away from you more than it gives you if you let it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I found really, really difficult, and I would almost call it I'm on the verge of addiction now, is not to look at my phone when there is no need for it. Like, you are sitting somewhere, it's beautiful, the sun, you see the birds, there is some movement around. Like generally it should be a very enriching, very beautiful scene. And before you know it, you have phone in your hand and you're checking what's new on Twitter. And you're like, when did this, what?
Yeah.
Right? And these automatic behaviors is what kills your thinking, or your ability to be here now and focus on one thing. So what I'm trying now is to really consciously think about, where's my phone? What am I doing with it? And how did it appear in my hand, and what are the behaviors that lead to it? So now I'm running a small experiment myself. So every single time I come home, I try to put the phone on the same spot and not to walk around it, in the flat. When I have a conversation with someone, I don't have the phone next to me, right? The phone's somewhere else, either in the bag, in my pocket. I have notifications switched off. In the evening, I try to put the phone in a different room so I don't have the need to look at it, because I realize it's really taking away a lot of your cognitive capacity, and it also very simply works with your dopamine in a way that's super attractive. So you have to consciously choose not to feel good.
Yep. Wow.
And that's super difficult.
Yeah, you know, I'll share something that is probably atypical. I mean, you're going to get a lot of expertise around, you know, how to think better and all that. The one thing I would ask you to think about in terms of expanding your thinking is put a question to yourself in a very positive, not in like a heavy way, but in a positive way. Like, you know, how, if before you go to bed, ask yourself, how might I do whatever I'm trying to do? And especially if I had all the money in the world, all the resources in the world, or in fact, I had a magic wand and I could do anything I want, okay? And then, two things. The time before you sleep, sometimes you have a great imagination. And you'll be surprised that sometimes when you sleep, you come up with ideas and solutions. Put a notepad by your bed and write them down when you wake up. Like, hey, I came up with this interesting new solution or this new business idea. And, you know, sometimes, oh God, these are really stupid. But sometimes you'll come up with some of your best, craziest, funnest ideas during both the time before you fall asleep and when you when you dream, and write them down when you wake up.
One of the best things about working with Jeff and Andy, and there's a monthly live stream I host along with the two of them and Amanda McCulloch. Amanda is the executive director of the Data Visualization Society, is we don't agree on everything. And but we will debate these things and say, well, here's why I feel differently about this. And force me to reconsider and go, you know what? That's a really valid point. I hadn't considered that before. So the growth comes from keeping an open mind and just kind of recognizing when being closed to these things have harmed me. That I think I was much less flexible and more, what's the word that I'm looking for? Intractable 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I thought I had all the answers, and no, I don't. You know, so you want good colleagues who will give you pushback, and you want people to find the flaws. You want people to find the errors. There's a really good quote at the end of the book, Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. I'm sorry, I can't remember who the authors are, but it's going to take too long. I almost know certainly where the book is right behind me and can probably find the quote, but essentially it is saying, you know, the people who point out your flaws or the things, they're your most their greatest benefactors. They're helping you grow. They're helping you get better.
I hope there's some evidence of that. Actually, I first thing that comes to mind is I think reading is very important. There are many leaders of thought out there. Now, my brain seems to be naturally constructed to create a lot of joy for me when I connect ideas. Everybody may not be wired that way, but I think reading is one way to really open yourself up to different kinds of thought, and certainly to read about thought. One of the things that became a fascination for me, you were talking about noise, and I believe in noise he mentions fundamental attribution error as one of the cognitive errors. And again, I think this thing is something that really shows up in emotional intelligence, and that's that I can talk about the U.S. culture in particular. I think it's extremely prevalent here, and it may be a human thing. based on survival, but I think we often judge people by making them responsible for how we're experiencing them. So, for instance, I was in a job where I was the program manager of talent development, and I often had to deal with conflict between people in the organization. And there was one young man who was in the help desk department who was particularly irascible. And people eventually totally dismissed him. I really had to work with him behaviorally to the best of my ability. But the flip side is that we decide that somebody's behavior is who they are. And that takes me back to the idea that our emotions are not who we are. And we often identify with our emotions and, take them personally and, oh, I'm a bad person because I'm having uncomfortable feelings, blah, blah, blah. But we also do that on a much bigger stage. And we will look at people and decide that it's a character flaw instead of a product of circumstances if they're expressing themselves in a way that we're not comfortable with. So things like that, becoming aware of things like cognitive errors, which is something that has been studied. Now again, some of this becomes an aspect of what is social reality. And social reality is not always correct. But when you look at some of these big discoveries about thought and thinking and logic and explore those, that helps you change your thinking because it helps you separate from what is perhaps negative social reality. And all of it was developed for seemingly positive reason. The other thing is meditation. I haven't talked about meditation, but I am a meditator. I do study mindfulness practices, and that is one of the things that has made me self-aware. And self-awareness is really the beginning and the foundation of emotional intelligence, and particularly as part of that emotional self-awareness. I can't believe it's taken me this long in our conversation to say that. But a big part of self-awareness is noticing your thinking. And also
reading.
Yeah, and part of noticing your thinking is noticing that it's not always true.
To think differently, you got to challenge all assumptions. So there are no what we call sacred cows. You look at everything and you examine it as if it's new. For instance, you know, in the background there's a guitar. You examine it and say, well, you know, I know it's a guitar now, but what could I do with it to make it something totally different? How could I repurpose it and it have even greater use? So I got to challenge the existence of the guitar, right? It's like I mentioned Uber. I'm challenging the existence of the taxi business, right? How can I repurpose it? How can I do it differently, right? So thinking, you know, you have thought, decisions, actions, and results. In order to change the result, the bottom line, you got to change your thought process. When you change your thoughts, the types of decisions that you make change. When the types of decisions you make change, the actions that you now take change, right? So you have to be able to examine how you think and why you think the way that you do. Often a lot of that comes from our environment. We're conditioned to think a particular way, given our education, given our family, given our friends. But I need to intentionally think. I need to intentionally be aware of what my thoughts are, where they're coming from. I need to intentionally look at my mental model, because we have mental models all around everything we do. When you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed and you decide to go shower, there's a certain ritual that you have every day around that, right? That's your mental model around what that is. Well, if you want to do something different, say for instance, you decide to go jogging early in the morning, then now that routine changes. So your mental model around that changes, right? You have to first, in order to implement any change, any transformation, the first thing you got to do is examine that mental model. Why do I see it the way that I do, right? And then I got to ask the question, how can I deconstruct it, tear it down, and now I got to reconstruct it, right? I got to build it anew so that it will serve me well. Now, all of our mental models we're not going to deconstruct because some of us serve us very well. It's only when your mental model doesn't serve you well that you do go through the deconstruction, reconstruction. It's like the butterfly and the caterpillar, right? I like to use that example. You got the caterpillar who goes from from caterpillar to butterfly, right? The butterfly is not a new caterpillar. It is a new entity. It is a new being, right? The butterfly never goes back to being the caterpillar. It goes through a metamorphosis, of what we call the messy middle. And in that, this ugly little creature becomes a beautiful creature, right? Something brand new. You have to do the same thing with your thoughts. You have to be able to deconstruct your thoughts, just like the butterfly goes through the metamorphosis to become a butterfly. You have to be able to do that and reconstruct it.
There are two parts of thinking that are important to me. Creative thinking and critical thinking. Creative and critical. To creatively think is to expand the area of your thoughts. And to critically think is to analyze any ideas carefully. Too many people, it's like they're running through life and they never take the time that good thinking requires. Good thinking takes time. It's almost like the difference between people who eat all their food quickly, fast as they can. They're just always, shove food in your mouth and eat fast and run and do something else, as opposed to those people who take their time and relish and savor a good meal. Thinking is the same way. Too many people wrongly believe that thinking shouldn't take much time. You can rush right through it. But thinking requires, like a good meal, it requires time. If you devote the time to it and you try to expand your mind, you can be more creative in your thinking. And then if you try to analyze ideas, okay, here's what somebody has said, but what's the evidence for that? Do I think that's true or not? Or could it be wrong? To critically analyze takes time. So I think we devote too much time, at least in my culture right now, we devote too much time to things that don't really matter. And we don't devote enough time to things that do really matter. Socrates once said, we think about and talk about things that hardly matter at all. We don't give enough time to the truly important things. And that was true of his time, it was true of our time. We entertain ourselves to death, right? We think about who's won the football match, who's won the World Cup, who's won and that's all good, that's all fun. We should enjoy things like that, but we should also give ourselves time to think. And that's so important. Then we can be more creative, then we can be more critical. And people think the word critical is a negative word. It just means looking carefully. Considering carefully ideas before we embrace those ideas. Again, back to embracing and releasing. Critical thinking helps us know which ideas to embrace and which ideas to release.
Well, first of all, I read a ton of books. I mean, I really, and they're not just one type of book. I mean, I read everything from art books to business books to nonfiction, and I think one of the things about that is that I don't read them cover to cover either. I do a lot of skimming and look for what's important to take away, and I also find myself in conversation with a lot of different people, which has me thinking differently, and which is interesting. People often think, well, don't you people think by themselves, but our thinking gets improved by being in conversation with others.